Welcome to another episode of Bright Headed Publishing Audiobook Book Club. I am your host, Kelly Morgan. Today, I'm excited to bring you a wonderful Christian author who has published multiple books and has 2 series. I think it's wonderful. Let me introduce you to Christian author Cynthia Middlebrooks Harris. Now, Cynthia wears many hats. She is an ordained minister, a native of Atlanta, and a Christian fiction author. She has published 6 books. In 1984, Cynthia entered the Army, where she met and married her husband of 32 years, Minister Kim Harris. Together, they have 2 children, Dominique and Stephanie. Now, Cynthia has a passion and heart to see the people of God healthy, spiritual, emotionally, and physically. She is a teacher, a playwright, Christian mentor, and is currently working on her degree in theology. Her work has appeared in Higher Connection magazine twice, and her ministry has expanded all the way to West Germany. She understands that her responsibility to God is to spread His word by any means necessary. It is her determination to do just that through the power of fiction, romance, sound, and drama. Cynthia was born to write. She lives and breathes her motto: ministry is always required. Welcome to the book club, Christian author Cynthia Middlebrooks Harris. Cynthia, welcome to the podcast. I am so happy you are here and have decided to come on and be a member of the Audiobook Book Club. How are you doing today?
I'm doing amazing. Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to it.
I am excited for the conversation. You've written many books, and so we can talk about all of them. We can talk about one of them. I'm just excited, for you to be here and let the listeners get to know you. So my first question is, tell us about you and the journey to how you became this author.
Oh, wow. Well, I'm 54 years old. Married, to an amazing man. We're both ordained ministers, actually. And that was part of the journey of me beginning to be published. We were stationed here. I was a part of a local women's ministry, and we had several things we would do. We would have dance routines, and we would have readings from poets. And she came to me once and said, "I heard you write the Christmas plays for your church. Would you mind writing a play for the next women's conference? And this is the area I want you to focus on." And so I began to write a play about 2 women who were going through very similar tragedies. And because it was for a church, it was implemented around the way Christians handle their life versus what they think someone outside the church would handle their life. And this play began to be so popular in my local city that people wanted to know more about the characters other than the hour and 15-minute play that was performed at the Parker Fine Hearts of the high school. And so I began to develop the characters more. And before I knew it, I had a full-fledged novel on my hands. And even more of the characters began to come out of that more and more and more. And then I had a series on my hand. But I have always had an imagination. Even growing up, my English teacher said to me, "Your imagination is so strong, you should consider becoming a writer." Well, at 12 years old, who wants to do that for a living? And I just looked at her and said, "No way, I'm never going to do that." But I was so very good at creative writing. And I was so good at allowing my imagination to come through words. And she kept pushing and pushing. And every year I went into a school and into high school, every English teacher kept pushing me to be an author. And the more they pushed, the more I regressed and said, "No way." And then years later, the opportunity came to write the play. And before I knew it, I was becoming what I said I would never be. And that was a writer.
It was your destiny.
It was.
become a writer. Even though
It
you
was.
were trying to run away from it, it still caught up with you and it brought you to where you are today.
Exactly. The main reason why I think my imagination was so creative, and I can share this now because my family won't be offended by it. We've discussed it. I was running away from my real life. And inside my imagination, I could create my family to be the people that I wanted them to be. And my world was perfect in that place. And that was the reason why I think I developed such a creativity in the first place, is because I was running from the reality of how my family was divided on issues and how there were tragedies and there was just so much going on. And I wanted to be in the everyday, what the TV considered at that time, the everyday lifestyle that a wonderful family lives in, and they had all these sitcoms on with these perfect families, and the Cleavers were like the way that people should live. And my family was anything but that. And so I think my imagination created because I wanted to be in something more functional. And that, I think, was the ground floor of how I began to be so imaginative in what I would write. I was writing what I wanted versus what I had.
That is really inspirational, because I think there's a lot of creative people out there who do the same thing that you did, ran away from writing. Some people consider it hard. Some people think they can't do it. But if there's a writer in you, it will come out somewhere in your life. It will come out.
Eventually.
It can't help itself. It will. So I like to always ask authors like yourself, even though you're a little bit more seasoned than other authors I have talked to, because you have several books out. You self-published, and I'm sure that was a journey, and I really want you to share some of that journey with somebody who is just starting out, maybe somebody who's thinking about being published and they have delusions of grandeur like I did, right? And I was supposed to be on Oprah. I was supposed to be on Oprah right now talking about my book, right? It did not work out. So what was your journey, and how did it help you, to get to where you are today? Because I'm sure you learned some lessons.
I learned a lot of lessons along the way. It was an uphill battle financially, because at the time that I was beginning to write this play for my minister friend, my mother was developing a brain tumor that was going to eventually cause her to pass away. But it was at a time when someone had to take care of her, and she could no longer take care of herself. So financially, I wasn't in a place to give the monies that were needed for developing the book, or the editing process, or the production and the publishing at all, because most companies were asking me for $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 that I just did not have in my bank account. And it was so amazing, because the people at the church, and I'm not going to cry saying this, because I'm so appreciative to them. They were so adamant about me getting this book out that they put forth some finances for me to begin to work with the first company. They were so with me in doing this that the girl that I actually wrote the play for, she actually wrote a $1,000 grant check from her fund to start the ball rolling. And then my church followed suit. And before I knew it, I had the first monies. I don't want to give them out, because now I'm even angry that I even went with that company. And I was able to go with them and get ready to produce the first book. And like so many people, I was promised the world. I was told how wonderful the book was. I was told how great people would receive it. I was just led to believe that I was just the best thing since Christ walked on the water, And so I was a little bit too vain, I think, at that time for my own good, because I just fell into it hook, line, and sinker. I found myself doing rewrites that cost even more money, and I finally ran out of money to keep doing rewrites for the editors, and I had to finally just publish the book as is. And Kelly, it was horrible. It was horrible. And when I read the first book a few years later, I thought, oh my God, why did someone not tell me how horrible this was? But they were my friends, and they were wanting to protect my feelings. And I'm not a very thin-skinned person. You can tell me when something is not right. But I found that those vanity companies, they're just that. A lot of them are vanity companies. You still have to do your own marketing. They put a one-word blog in their Twitter, one-word thing in their Twitter, and that's how they promoted me. Everything else was up to me. I had no platform, no audience. I had no idea what to do after that. And so the book just kind of fell by the wayside for a few years. And then on top of that, my mother was getting progressively worse. And so we had to begin to make decisions concerning her. And I kind of put things on hold for a while to take care of her, which meant there really was no finances then. And unfortunately, there were not a lot of people that were willing to say, here's some really good information. So they were wanting me to join their webinars, pay for their services. And I was finding myself giving 50 here, 100 here, 75 here, 150 here, 200 here to go on their webinars, only to find out they were telling me things I already knew and that I could have found very easily and had found free on YouTube. So I was very frustrated. They were selling me information that was already free. So I would say to new authors that are really trying to get going, do your homework before you begin to financially submit yourself to any one company or person or anything. Do your homework. Find out what out there you can learn just from YouTube or other authors. I would tell them to get on Facebook, find social writing groups on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. They have a lot of social writing groups that you can join the author groups, and they are a wealth of knowledge. They're so much more willing to help you. But when you get outside of that and begin to search those people that are giving webinars, sometimes you're going to get a lot of empty information that's only going to help the person that you're sending your $39.95 to for the webinar. They're the only ones that are going to benefit from it, because you're going to leave knowing absolutely nothing or what you've already known. So I would say use those groups around you. Search your local areas and find out if there are author groups in your area. It took me nearly 7 or 8 years to realize there was a Missouri authors group not even 45 minutes away from my home. I'm thinking, wow, I never knew this. So take the time to Google search your area and find out what you have in your own local area before you venture out into some of those places that are going to be more money hungry, because you'll find out that a lot of people that are at your level are more willing to show you what they have already that will help you versus someone who is already at the top and they really just want you to add to their personal platform. And so I found that the struggle was very great when it came to getting information from people. I found that the struggle was even greater, unfortunately, in the Christian author market than it was the non-Christian author market. I found the non-Christians were more willing to assist me at times. That was very disappointing to me than some of my Christian counterparts. But now I have found several Christian author groups that are just like, yeah, girl, let's do this. Let's go. So it's all a matter of taking your time to research before you start financially investing.
Yeah, that's really good advice, because I fell prey to that, but I always say that my journey brought me to the podcast. So if I wouldn't have doled out my coins, right, and gave it to somebody who gave me nothing in return.
Yes.
And I doled out money I really didn't have, because
yes,
they told me, I'll never forget what they said to me. He said to me, Kelly, do you know how good you are? Do you even know how good you are? And I was like, I'm that good, right? And I'm, and maybe I am, and maybe I'm not. But the fact of the matter is, he didn't say it out of being genuine. He said it to get me to go ahead and cough up that money, right? Mm-hmm. So I love to hear about the journey and know that, there are people who are willing to help you, and there are resources that are free as well. But it is work. You have to be willing to put in the work. It is work. So tell us about your books and the series, and I'm really interested because you've got so many books. How many total do you have right now?
I have 7 published right now, including republishing the first one from the company I was with to self-publishing. I'm currently working on book 8, and there are about 21 more books on my laptop that are in my imagination waiting to surface and manifest.
Wow. See, that is truly a gift you have, and that is a blessing. I know some people are struggling just to get that one book out of them. You've got 7, 21 more in your mind, and that's just wonderful. So tell us about the book series, and we can do this however you want.
Mm-hmm.
You can talk about each book, or you can talk about all of them because when you say it's a series, is it all these books kind of flow together like a continuing story?
Yes, they are a continuing story, and I am a bit of a cliffhanger, which drives my readers crazy, but they love it. The readers that I have, they actually like the cliffhanger. I love cliffhangers myself. So I tend to write the way I love to read from other authors. I love for them to leave me hanging until the next book is coming out. I love the Left Behind series from Tim LaHaye and Jenkins. I love waiting to see what was going to happen. And so I found myself really easily following that path of leaving them with a scene that is underdeveloped, that they're thinking, what is going to happen in book 2? And I really do try to pick up very quickly in the next book and keep going and not leaving them hanging for 3 chapters to find out what's going on and moving into the next part of it. That's kind of how I tend to write, because I love cliffhangers myself.
So you call yourself a Christian author, and all the characters and the stories center around the Christian faith?
No, they don't, actually, because we live in a world that is not centered around anything but itself. So I try to be very real, very, very realistic, because there are things that happen to people, no matter whether you're Christian or not, that have to be dealt with, that have to be discussed, that have to be moved through, that have to have therapy sessions to get through. Whether you're Christian or not doesn't matter. Life happens no matter what. But the main reason that I began to write Christian fiction was because of my faith. But to tell you the truth, to really set a stage here, it was very hard for me to write Christian fiction. And not because I didn't have the imagination. That wasn't it. The imagination was there. But I'm also an ordained minister. And the backlash that I received from my minister peers almost made me stop writing. They thought I was wasting my time. Really? Using the God-given talent that I had of the Bible to write Christian. They thought that I had fell off the Christian bandwagon and I was secular in disguise. And they thought, how are you going to write something that you're going to use your talent for fiction? Why are you wasting your God-given knowledge of the Word of God to write a smutty romance novel? And, with all the knowledge you have of the Bible, why would you choose fiction? Why would you not choose a non-fiction book that's going to help Christians to live better? And I'm thinking to myself, there's no way they've read my books if they feel this way, because everything they just suggested is actually how my books are. They do tell you how to live. They just don't use book, chapter, and verse. I had to finally make a decision. Who was I writing for? And why was I doing it? And once I came to that understanding of who my audience was and how I was trying to reach them, I started relying less and less on what people thought and relying more on what I felt God was leading me in ministering to other people through the books. And that's exactly what he's doing through this series, The Other Side of Through. It is ministering to people on a level that they can understand God. Because a lot of times in church, let's face it, I don't know where a lot of people's faith are listening to this podcast, but a lot of times you sit in church wondering, what are they talking about and who are they talking about? I have no idea how to apply what they're saying to my life. I have no idea about this God they're talking about. He makes absolutely no sense to me because they're serving him up like he's filet mignon, and all I can digest right now with my mindset is a hamburger. So I need someone that's going to get God off the pulpit, off the pages, and in a life where I can see him working all around me. And that is the goal and the design of this book. I want to reach people, and that is my design, is to reach people who may never walk into a church, but they'll begin to see just how powerful God's creation is around them. And they'll see that even in their worst of times, they can get through it, and they will get through it. And there is light at the end of their tunnel. No matter what they've gone through, there's nothing that they cannot overcome. And you know what? Life doesn't always end out the way we want it to end out. Sometimes things don't get solved. Sometimes murders go unsolved. Sometimes rapists get away with things. You know, everything is not perfect. So my books don't have always a happy story, happy ending, ever after ending to them. Sometimes things go unsolved and people don't always get caught. And you have to be able to overcome that in your life and be able to move on when there is no closure in your tragedy. And so the fiction novels that I write are very realistic around the fact that sometimes you have got to learn how to get past and get through when there is no closure. How do you still move on with life and be happy and be victorious? And so that's my main mission. And if I were to say my target audience, people would say to me, who's your target audience? Learn your target audience. I must have sit through 15 webinars of people telling me to reach my target audience. But no one ever showed me or told me what the target, how to find this target person. And so finally I began to reread my books, and I said, who am I talking to in these books? And I finally realized that I was talking to my younger self. I was telling her what she was going to go through and how she could avoid some of it and how she could get through it, even in the midst of what seems like a hopeless situation. And so I began to realize I'm talking to my 20 to 30-year-old self. And I'm telling her, this is how you're going to make it through it. And that's how I began to realize how to write better, how to be more concise in what I was writing, and how to show this is the life that the average person is living, and this is how God can see you through it.
So what is the difference between a fiction writer like myself? I like to tell stories, right? So what's the difference between a fiction writer and a Christian fiction writer? Help me understand that, because I'm sure you want your books to appeal to the non-Christians too, right? So what's the difference? So labels tend to make people think, oh, she's a Christian writer, I don't want to read that, right?
Exactly.
What is the difference?
Really, actually, a Christian writer just means I am a Christian writer. It doesn't mean that my books are going to be full of scripture and they're going to be perfect people that do nothing. It doesn't mean that all the characters are going to be Christians. It doesn't mean that everything is going to be perfect. It just means I'm writing from a perspective that God is the underlying authority of everything. That's the difference.
But then really you're just an author writing from the perspective of your faith.
Yes,
whatever
exactly.
That faith is.
Exactly. It does not mean that if you're not a Christian, you will not enjoy reading these novels. I have several readers who are not Christians who at first told me to take the Christian label off of Christian writer. I said, well, I can't deny faith. So I have to have the Christian in there somewhere because I want the blessings of the Lord to remain on what I write. And then she came back, and I won't share her name because I didn't get permission to. She came back and said, thank you so much for what you wrote. I've never been to church because I was so afraid of how I would be treated. I was afraid of how I would be judged. I was afraid that I wouldn't be good enough, that I wouldn't live up to what people say a Christian is supposed to be. But you have shown me that I'm more Christian than I ever thought I was, and that my faith is stronger than I ever thought I was, even though I've never gone to church. And so I would say to people, it's not really so much that I am just pushing Christ, because I am pushing Christ, but I'm not pushing him in a way that's intrusive, in a way that is overwhelming. I'm pushing Christ as a way of saying he's there all the time. You just don't realize it yet, but he's still there. Even though you may be angry or mad or frustrated, he's kind of still there, but my books, even my Temptation series is very, what my Christian counterparts consider very risque, because I have scenes where there's characters going at it on top of the desk and they're like, oh my God, you wrote that. Well, we're Christians. I did not speak my children into existence. I had sex to have them. So I am not going to pretend that I'm not a romantic, erotic person, because I am. You have never read Song of Solomon if you don't think that Christ wants you to enjoy your mate in every way. And I think the misconception is that Christianity has been promoted as being some extraordinary, out and non-personable romantic life, non-romantic life. And that's just not the case. The book of Song of Solomon in the Bible is very erotic. It is a very erotic story and a very passionate story between a king and his Shulamite wife. And it's just, it's way more erotic than all of my books are, personally.
That, that's really interesting. I am not one for labels. So, and that's why I ask about, being a Christian author versus, I would just call myself a fiction author, right? But I can see that what you're writing would appeal to the masses, which is important. See, and that's a misconception.
Yes.
That is a misconception that we're going to help to try to overcome and get people to kind of broaden their horizons on what they read. So the whole time we've been talking, we've never even said and uttered the name of these wonderful books. So please take me through all 6 of them. I want to know the name of the book. I want to know a little background on each book, because if it's a series, I'm interested. People love series, right? And I'm interested. And so just, I'm going to stop talking so that you can tell us all about these books.
Okay. So the name of the first series is The Other Side of Through, which is the name of the very first book. And is also the name of the ministry that developed through the books, The Other Side of Through. And the mission is romance from a biblical aspect. And it is love according to God's holy word. In short, the series, although it's fiction, is going to minister to people on a nonfiction level. In the midst of the romance are the secrets to success in relationships. It's unlocked. And one of the things that God was showing me is somebody is going to be able to have their marriage saved through what you write. And it happened in one of the books that I'll get to shortly. But more than that, this series began to minister to the men in my life. I began to develop men readers. I have one African-American, he's a doctor, and he was a member of our church. And he read the series because it was on his wife's nightstand. And he picked the book up and began to read it out of sheer just curiosity of, what is this female minister in my church writing about? And he texts me at like 3:00 in the morning. He was away on a mission. And he says, is your husband there? Let me speak to your husband first, so he won't think I'm doing something crazy with his wife behind the scenes. And he spoke to my husband, and I got on the phone, and he said, I wanted to thank you for how you portrayed African-American men in your stories, because they have such a stigma of not being romantic, of not taking care of their families, of not being men who actually marry their, quote, baby mamas, who are not spiritual at all, who are not driven to be successful. And you have shown that even though we have flaws, we are men that are doing the right thing or trying to do the right thing with our family. He says, thank you, because you're breaking through the stereotypes that men have of the average African-American male. And he says, I want, to know, what was your inspiration, behind these men, that you've met. And I have also had other women say, who are these men in the book you talk about? Because I don't know any men like those. And I have to say, First of all, most of the men in the book are stereotyped around my husband, who's just an amazing man of God. But also the men in my church that I saw every day. I saw them, and the way they were with their families leaked into the books, even without me realizing it. They were men who, yes, made mistakes. As you see in this series that I'm going to talk about here shortly, they were men who, yes, made mistakes, but they were also men who knew how to get it right with their families, with their homes, or in their jobs when things weren't going right. And they could always see that, no, that grass wasn't greener on the other side when I stepped out of my marriage. I should have stayed here and watered my own grass. And so it's showing all these aspects of things that we don't talk about in church because we don't want anybody to know, oh, well, heaven forbid if you know somebody in church husband cheated on them. Oh, that doesn't happen. Well, it happens every day and it happens all the time. We just don't talk about it because we don't want anybody to know that inside the church is just as much issues as outside the church. We just want everybody to think our world is perfect, and it's not. It's still life. And so this book is centered around life. And the first book, it tells you whether you like romance or not. The title is going to catch you because whether you're a Christian or not, everyone wants to get through the situation that they're in. Everyone wants to get to the other side and still be alive and not so tattered and torn and in pieces with holes in their life. And this series starts off with two females who are having a similar tragedy to happen to them. They're both losing someone very close to them. The very first opening of the first book, her husband is dying in her arms, and she's just found out they're going to have the second baby. The first one died, was stillborn, and she's trying to will him to live by telling him that she's pregnant. And of course he doesn't. He dies. Everything's not perfect. It doesn't happen. There's no kiss the prince and the princess and she wakes up all the time. People die, things happen. Families are left with no husbands are left with no wives. Stuff happens, and you have to be able to pick up pieces and move forward and have family around you that will help you. And so one woman, she moves forward. She takes advantage of everything around her. She seeks God. The other one, the evangelist, eventually in the series, turns her back on God, turns her back on her family, turns her back on her marriage. She's angry with God. I have been serving you, and this is how you repay me. You allow this tragedy to happen. I want nothing to do with you anymore. I am done with this God thing. Forget anything about Christianity. Don't mention it to me. I don't want to talk about it. And she becomes very suicidal. Along the way, there's gang violence, who takes family members. There's rape that happens to people. There's things that happen from people behind the pulpit that shouldn't happen. There are also instances to where there's adoptions taking place. There's redemption going on. So book one sets the stage that this is going to be a bumpy but very crazy ride. Along the way, it shows the character of one man who sets the stage for the whole series. Even though he's not going to be alive to see it, before he dies, he has already preset a journey that his wife is going to take, and he's trying to make sure this journey happens, and he, even before he passes away. I don't want to give too much of the plot away. He sets his cousin up to marry his wife after he dies, and of course everyone is against it, but they both realize this is what he wanted, and there were specific reasons why he wanted it to be that way because of what was going to happen later in their life. Is a book, second book is titled I Promise, which talks about the marriage between the wife and the cousin. And the teenagers come into this book very strongly because it shows you just how tossed and turned teenagers feel in church. Some of them feel like church does absolutely nothing for them. The people in there are fake, because this is the problem in church. And this is what, I hate to sound really churchy in the broadcast, but it's very paramount in this book. And also that men and women of ministry understand this is how their children feel sometimes. And this book brings that out, because sometimes we can be ministers at home, at work, at church, and be successful and fail at home with our children. they see a perfect minister in the pulpit, but at home they see their wives not talking to their husbands. They see them backbiting and doing everything that everyone else does. They see them cheating, and they see them lying, and they see them stealing. And so the children get a misconception. This Jesus stuff ain't got nothing. The world is just, I might as well be in the world and do what I got to do because my parents are so fake. So these children have a very strong part of this book because they begin to show what they see in church and how they see church and how people can make life better with their youth ministries. They're going through things. They're caught up in gangs. They're caught up in pornography. They're caught up in a lot of things in these books, and they're beginning to minister to themselves. Outside their adults, they're beginning to talk to themselves and help themselves. We have teenage pregnancies that are going on in the series. It is really a reality series on a downscale level, really, if I really could say that. But the promise is they are understanding in no way, shape, or form. They realize that there is never going to be an unproblematic scenario in any marriage. Every marriage is going to have ups and downs, ins and outs, whether you're a person of faith or not. Amen. And they'll realize that it is joined tightly together because of the two people have a desire to make it work. And then the third book is titled The Valley of the Shadow of Death. Now, this was a really hard book for me to write because it was based on a situation with my mother when we lost my baby brother. He was born with a hole in his heart and only lived for a few days. In this series, the female, her child is kidnapped by a woman who has a fatal attraction to her husband. And eventually, because the baby has an allergic reaction, it accidentally dies when the woman has kidnapped it. And so she is angry with the husband because he didn't listen to her in saying, this woman has a fatal attraction. You don't understand what you're getting involved in by befriending her and trying to counsel her. She doesn't want counsel. She wants you. And so he and her almost lose their marriage and their family because of the death of the baby. And she turns her back on God. She turns her back on family. She becomes very suicidal. And she's literally walking through the valley of the shadow of death. And her whole family is walking through this valley with her because everyone is at their wits' end, trying to figure out how to get through this tragedy and still see that life can move forward. And eventually they begin to get through because one woman in the beginning, Talinda Travis, she eventually meets the other woman, Navette Goodfellow, purely by accident through ministry, and one begins to minister to the other and begin to show her that you can still live with your family through this tragedy. And that's where book 4 takes a break from the series and introduces interracial marriages. It breaks through that and it introduces interracial marriages. And it shows just how prejudiced people can be without even knowing that they are. You can have someone say, well, I'm not prejudiced against black people. I have black friends. I have black people that work with me. Or I'm not prejudiced against white people. I have white friends. I have white people that work with me. But when it comes to someone marrying my daughter or my son, now my prejudice antenna is on full alert. I want my son to marry me. I want my daughter to marry me. And so in this book, the two fathers realize just how prejudiced they are when these two children come together to get married. And everything is stemmed around them understanding, wow, I did not realize just how prejudiced I really was. I really actually thought I was okay. But when I was faced with an intimate relationship with someone of an opposite race, then I realized I'm just as racist as the next person. So that came out. And also in the midst of this story, when you don't close the door on things of your past, they come back to haunt your future. And so this book, Legitimate Issues is the name of it. It lets us know that even though you have issues in your life that may be legitimate, you cannot allow them to stop you from moving forward in your destiny, in your future, in your grace. And the main characters, or Dyson Jameson, who is Spanish and white, and you have Latoya James, who is African American, and her father is a general in the army, and he has had a lot of pull. And the young man she's wants to marry is enlisted in the army and is definitely afraid that his career could end for marrying her. And in the midst of it, it is also a time of the war is breaking out and soldiers are being protested. So I was able, because I have a military background, to be able to share in the midst of this story how these service members feel when they're walking to the airport, through the airport with their families, and there's people on the side protesting them, holding up signs saying baby killer, and how they feel going over to fight for your right to call them a baby killer. So I was able to bring that part of it out to maybe help some people who are against the war to go to the Capitol Hill, on their steps of the Capitol Hill, and fight the battle there, versus protesting the soldiers who are giving you the right to even say what you're saying. They're fighting for your right to have that freedom. They're not the ones that you should battle. You should battle the ones making the decisions, and that's where you're going to be the most effective. So I was able to relay how we as military feel when we return home from deployment, because I was military myself, and it's hard to bring yourself back into a place where people hate you for what you've done for their freedom. So I was able to bring that out in a fiction standpoint, but it had a very powerful point behind it to drive that home to people. Let's fight our battles in the right place, to where we won't hurt the people that are actually giving us our freedoms. And so that was the main drive. And then book 5 comes back to the series, The Fight for Life. And it shows you just because something has been spoken over your life doesn't mean that you don't have to do anything to make it come to pass. We have the families all coming back together, and another tragedy strikes. The same family who lost the baby, now the husband's been shot, and now he's fighting for his life, and now he comes back and a baby is born, and now she's raped in the midst of being pregnant, and now there's another life being fought for. And to come to find out, the minister from the other family that they were friends with, her son is the reason why the husband was shot in the first place, because of his gang association. So their lives are interwoven. You have people who have 4 or 5 different families, and it all comes together in this book to show you just how their lives were entangled the whole time, and they didn't know it because they had friends of friends. The same way we are. I may be friends with Kelly, and Kelly have friends over here, and I don't realize there's a connection with that person until maybe 5 years down the road, when Kelly may happen to mention something, and I'll say, oh, that's my first cousin. Wow, all this time there's been a connection that we didn't know about. And so the book really just expresses, family life and connections, and there's comedy in there, there's relationships in there, there's girls meeting in the beauty shops and having their beauty shop conversations in there, there's guys meeting to have their man cave fun conversations in there. The book just really draws you into life. The two really things that I really want to bring out mainly is how the book has ministered to people. I have people that email me and say, you have written a narrative of my life. I don't know how you got in there. I don't know what gave you the idea to write what you write, but your book, chapter 8 and 9 in this book, literally saved my marriage. I was about to walk out on my husband. He had an affair. He had no idea how I felt. He wasn't wanting to go through counseling. He wasn't trying to understand my feelings. He was wanting me just to forget about it because she didn't matter anyway and move on. And when you described the woman and how she felt, and the husband and how he ministered to his friends after his affair, I let my husband read those 2 chapters. She said he came back in the room and he was crying and said, I never knew it affected you this way. I am so sorry. She said for the first time, he apologized to her, and they went into counseling, and their marriage was saved. And I've had people that have called me and said, I didn't know, I was running out of why I was telling my daughter she should remain a virgin. I was running out of, there's no virtue in that anymore. No one does that anymore. And she read your books, and she says, I want to be this female in this book. I want to hold myself together and be spiritually aware of who I am. I want to be mentally aware of who I am. I want to be successful in my life before I engage in relationships with someone else. I don't want to take baggage into a marriage. I want to be free from all of that. And so the books really cover all those little life lessons that you want to teach your young 20-year-old, but you may not know how to tell them. These books really show it in a fiction way without having too much overkill of scripture, and the series really just blesses. And when I switched over to the temptation series, I completely changed my mindset. I talked about all the temptations that come at people. I love football, so it's based around a football character. He's one of my favorite football players, and I was able to really just blend a lot of things that I knew about football through conversations with some NFL athletes into this program. Some things that weren't really going to be defamation to their character, but it was going to tell some of the truths behind the matter in a fiction way, and about the temptations that they find on the gridiron, and how sometimes it comes in and just really destroys their family sometimes, and how other times it lifts their family up. So I was able to share that. I was able to implement in the temptation a problem that my mother had in the character, the main character, female character in this book. Her name is Vanessa. She is not a virgin. She runs into this, and she's not a virgin or a Christian, even though she's adopted by ministers. She don't want nothing to do with God. And she actually runs into a football star. She's banned football players out of her life because all they do is hurt you and have other women, and she just banned football players. And she actually runs into a Christian football player who begins to show her a side of love that doesn't involve sex, because he's a virgin and a Christian. And so he shows her a side of love that doesn't involve sex, something that she has never been able to comprehend at all before this. And he shows her how a man is supposed to treat you and what he's supposed to do for you. But he has a lot of flaws. He's very pharisaical is a good word for him. He's very do as I do because what I do is the ultimate right way and everyone else is wrong. That's an underlining factor in his character. Even though he's showing her a good way, he has some flaws that are going to come out, that came out in the second book with a vengeance and almost ruined his relationship with her. But he shows her, and the main reason why she was so afraid to love was something that I found out about my mother when I was taking care of her the last year of her life. And she would have these days when she was very coherent, and she would have these days when the brain tumor and dementia had taken over, and she wouldn't know who she was or where she was. But on those days when she understood who I was or who she was, she would talk to me about deep things in her life growing up. And it's when I first realized my mother and I had a rocky relationship from like 15 to like 30 something. Very, very rocky, because I blamed her for my father's death. I blamed her for a lot of things in my life. And so I was just angry, and that's why my world began to be imaginative, and I created this perfect world around me because mine was so, for a better word, jacked up. But my mother began to tell me one of the reasons why she never told any of us that she loved us. She would never say to me or my sisters my sister and brothers that she loved us. And she said she felt that everything she loved, God took from her. She lost her father, who was a minister. She lost my father to a very tragic, serious domestic tragic situation. She lost my baby brother. He died a few days after birth. She lost other strong men in her family who were just very strong presence in her life. So she felt that everything she showed great love to, God took. So she figured if she never told anybody that she loved them, they would be safe around her. She thought she was a magnet for death. And so you don't think about that as being, that's crazy. But if you're living inside of that, it's not crazy for you. And so Vanessa in this story was afraid to tell the people that she really loved that she loved them. And so meeting Jaquan and falling in love with him means she had to fight that demon from her 10-year-old childhood of losing everybody. She had to fight that demon in order to be willing to go forward with a life with him. And it wasn't a very easy thing for her to do because everyone around her represented people that she loved. So she would keep herself distant to a certain extent and be there and show love without actually saying that she loved, because she thought saying the word love was the key in losing them. And so in her friend, she ends up befriending this girl who is in a relationship with her husband who's cheating with several men several women in his office. And she befriends her, and he allows her to be Vanessa's friend because Vanessa doesn't go to church. And he's tired of those churchy people too, who don't really ever help you with anything. It's the concept in this book. and but be judgmental and mind their own business when they shouldn't mind their own business. So he is very abusive to her. Eventually, in the end, it gets to the point where you think he's going to be abusive. There's other men who are trying to help her, but because they're men, they actually make her situation worse. But Vanessa eventually becomes this girl's friend and begins to give her non-Christian advice on what she thinks she should do. And she, being a strong Christian, wants to prove that she's not going to lose her marriage. So she's willing to stay in this trap just to prove a point. And Vanessa's like, girl, you are the stupidest person I've ever met in my life. Leave him, And so in the end of this book, in the end of book 1, you get the impression that this woman, her name is Katrina Morris, you get the impression that her husband is finally getting ready to hit her. Because
wait a minute. I'm listening to you talk. So you're telling me that The Temptation is a whole nother series.
It's another series. It's a separate series.
How many books are in the Temptation series?
2 so far. I'm working on the 3rd one. The Fight for Life ends with life coming forward and then begin new. But there's some things that go unsolved in that book that my readers were not happy about. The rapist was never found that raped the woman when she was pregnant, and they didn't like that. They wanted him to be found and convicted. They wanted a
happy ending.
And I say, look, I have had things happen in my life that were not solved. I had to learn how to live and be productive without closure in those situations. And so everyone is not going to have the perfect closure. You're going to have to make a decision to still fight for life and live. And that's how book 5 ends, which I actually am going to go back now and create 2 more books in that series because my readers are really wanting to know more about some other things. So that series is going to continue. But then the Temptation series is a whole other series, and it is way more secular than the Christian series. It doesn't push as much what people call a Christian value as the other book push, because it is really showing sometimes when you hold on to what you think is right, it actually causes you more harm than good. She was trying to hold on to the perfect Christian wife persona that it almost physically, emotionally, and destroyed her and cost her life. And in the end of book 1, he's coming at her like he is going to hit her, and that's where it stops. You don't know if he's going to hit her or not. And also, the virgin is about to give himself to the non-virgin girlfriend, and that's how book 1 ends. And it picks back up right where it leaves off. He does indeed abuse her, and abuses her greatly, and abuses her tremendously. She had developed a relationship with this male football player who was trying to get her out of it, and in the middle of it, he fell in love with a married woman. That was his mistake. He began to interact with her too much, and that's what started her husband to begin to physically abuse her, even though he was being abusive by having an affair. He began to physically abuse her because of her inappropriate relationship. He was with the other man, and everybody's like, he has some nerve. He's having an affair with 2 women to be mad that this guy kissed you. But so he does begin to abuse her greatly, and to come to find out, it is a generational curse in his family. His father was very abusive to his mother, and so she begins to be very proactive in making sure that it stops with her son. So she makes a decision to go against her son in court to help the daughter get custody of the child and get away, which was very hard for her to do. But she realized, I see myself, I see it in her eyes. And this is what most people in this series, the one thing I wanted people to get in this series is, when you're going through something as a woman, when you're going through your husband having an affair on you, and when you're going through abuse in your life, even though you're not trying to show it, it still shows. It shows in your actions. It shows in how indecisive you can be. It shows in how insecure you are. It shows in the sadness behind your eyes, even though you're smiling. And even though someone may act like they don't see it, they see it. They know it's there. But because they feel ill-equipped to help you, they choose to ignore the signs that you're showing them, because they don't feel like they have anything that can really help you anyway. And sometimes even in the church, we are ill-equipped to really help people through the strong points, because we're not solid enough in our own foundation with Christ to really to have the words that Christ spoke to speak into their lives, to show them just how strong they are and just how much of a healer God can be in their life if they allow him to. But because sometimes we feel ill-equipped, we will pretend like we don't see what we see. But people see your hurt. A woman who has been hurt looks in the eyes of another woman and she can tell. She knows the look and she sees the look. She may not respond to the look, but she sees the look. And his mother said, I saw the look and I knew what my son was doing to you without even asking. And I couldn't allow it to go forth anymore. And then in the end, she makes a decision on whether or not she's going to go to him. That drives everybody crazy. She makes a decision maybe to go back to him. And that's how the second book ends, with everybody just going crazy because, are you going to go back to him? Are you crazy? You're not going to get out of that house alive the second time.
And so book 3 in this series, you are in the process of writing?
Of writing now.
Okay, so don't give us any more.
I won't give any more on that.
Don't give us any more.
Because go ahead. In the midst of the temptation, it's focused around a football team based in Tennessee, and I changed the name of the team because NFL is really picky about the names and their brand, and everyone should be picky about their brand. You should protect your brand at all costs. And so it's based around all these football players, and they're all telling you it's their life on and off the gridiron, and it's just showing you just how contrast their life is on and off the gridiron, and how things happen. And even in this book, there's infidelity, there's secret lives, there's women on the side, there's a lot of things going on, a lot of temptations in this book that are going on, and people have this misconception that Christians aren't tempted. You come to Christ and your life is perfect, you're never tempted with anything, and you never do anything wrong. Well, that's just not the truth. You're tempted every day and you make mistakes every day. You do stuff wrong every day. That is a false image of Christianity. It's a very false image of it. You have a Savior who will grace you through things and will desire you not do them. But the problem is we're wrapped in a fleshly realm that works here where temptation happens. And yes, you fall prey to temptation every day if you're not strong-willed to say, I'm just not going to do that. You have to get to a place where you say, I'm just not going to do that anymore. But you fall prey to temptation like everyone else does.
Yeah, it sounds like both of the series are fantastic. How can people reach you? What provide us with like links, email address. How can people get at you and, read these books and learn more about you as an author?
Right now, the books are on special on my website until December 31st. They're $10 each if you order them through my website, and it is www.tosotministries.com, and you can go there and download the books. I will autograph them and send them to you. They're $10 each right now. You can also find me on Facebook at author CM Harris. And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at WriterCynt. And it's spelled differently. It's spelled wrong. It's WRITTERCYNT. So it's writer is intentionally spelled wrong. And that's where I am on Instagram and on Twitter. And on LinkedIn, I am Cynthia Middlebrooks Harris. And my YouTube page is also Cynthia Middlebrooks Harris. And I also have a blog where I'm ashamed to say I have not been on my blog in years because taking care of my mother kind of stopped my writing for about 5 years. And where I have been is WordPress, writingfortoday.wordpress.com, writing for today. So you can find me on all of those platforms. You can email me at tosotministries at gmail.com, spelled the same way, TOSOT ministries, MINISTRIES ministries.com. I answer phone calls, I answer emails, I answer text messages. I love to engage with my readers. They're constantly calling me, telling me how the books have ministered to them, how they help them, how they're practical. Thank you for writing everyday practical stuff that we can see. They're page turners. Oh my God, it's a roller coaster. I cry, I laugh, I throw the book, I get mad, I throw things across the room. I'm so angry at you sometimes of writing the book, and then I'm thinking, oh my gosh, she just rescued me in writing in the next book. So I enjoy interacting with my readers. One thing I would also say though, if I could just give a few more tips, I know we're running out of time. If I could give a few more tips to people that are just starting out, is start marketing your book long before you publish it. Don't wait until you publish it to begin to tell everybody about it. Begin to have short takes on on your social media. Begin to do short videos talking about them. Get you a good cover artist. I mean, I was doing it myself and I was doing it all wrong. I finally found a great cover artist. Get you a editor. Build your presence on social media. Start a blog. Try to find local author groups that you can brainstorm with. Know who your target audience is, so you're not trying to market to people who are not going to be interested in what you're trying to say. Develop a web page where people can reach you and interact with you. So I would say all those little tips to someone that is just starting out. I was not told to market. I tried to sell my book after I published it. No one knew me. They had no idea who I was. And people will buy you, not your book. They'll buy your book because they like you. So sell yourself, sell your brand, sell who you are, sell what you stand for, sell what you're going to get behind, sell what problems it is you're trying to help solve in the world. My main goal is I want to solve relationship problems. I want to solve people that are going through things in their marriages, young women who are upside down and don't know who they think they're supposed to be. And I want to help the light bulb click in their life. They learn who they are, establishing who they are, that they can be educated women. And even if they don't have the means to be educated, they can still educate themselves without even going to college. I want to be able to establish women and men marriages. And that is my goal in the series that I write.
And I think that's absolutely fantastic. I so appreciate you coming on and being a part of the Patio Book Club, sharing both of your series of your books. And I think it's safe to say that your words are incredibly powerful. It is a gift. When you write this third book to the Temptation series, I do expect you to come back and tell us about it. The door is always open for you to come back on the podcast and talk more about your books and other things that you may have going on at that time. I was going to say, hey, Cynthia, leave our readers, leave our listeners with words of wisdom, but you've already given them. But if you do want to have any parting words to the listeners, feel free. What would that be?
I would say to the young authors, don't allow anyone to stop you. You will get a lot of people who will say to you, everyone is self-publishing, everyone has a book, what's going to make yours stand out? You will get way more discouragement than you will encouragement. So I would say to them, choose your circle that you share sensitive information with very carefully. Because people who you think will be with you, in the long run, they really want a front row seat to your failure. They don't really want to push you forward. They want to be there to be able to say, I told you so. So choose your circle very carefully that you share your ideas with. Get people who are already successful in your area and begin to learn from them what they did to be successful if they're willing to share from you. But the one thing that I would mainly say is choose very carefully who you share your ideas with when they're in their infant stage, because too much negativity will cause you to either abort or kill your baby before it has a chance to flourish.
Very wise words. Again, Cynthia, thank you so much for being on the show. All of the links will be in the podcast description, so you'll know how to reach Cynthia. And until next time, keep writing. Thank you for listening to another episode of Bright Headed Publishing Patio Book Club. I have been your host, Kelly Morgan. We just wrapped up with Christian author Cynthia Middlebrooks Harris. She talked about her book series, The Other Side of Through and Temptation. Both of these series are available on her website, and they're also available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. All the links to Cynthia's books and her website are available in the podcast description. If you are an author or someone who supports authors, like an editor or graphic designer, we'd love to have you be a part of the book club. Email me at brightheadedpublishing@gmail.com. Again, that's brightheadedpublishing@gmail.com. And until next time, keep writing.